Thank you so much for joining this panel about fueling change in the public sector and in advocacy. Today we have the privilege of 3 amazing inspirational leaders, and I'll introduce each and every single one of them. Quratulain Fatima is the founder of Women for Peace Tech. She's a trailblazing policy practitioner renowned for extensive work in rural and conflict-ridden areas of Pakistan. As the first woman to join the Pakistan Air Force and the only Pakistani woman to serve in both public service and the military, Quratulain's pioneering spirit is matched by her relentless dedication to gender-inclusive development and conflict prevention. She holds an advanced degree from Oxford and has made significant strides at the intersection of water, conflict, and technology and gender. Her efforts have saved 24 minority religion sites in rural Punjab from illegal occupation, and her contributions to the UN World Bank flagship study, quote, Pathways for Peace, Inclusive Approaches to Preventing Violent Conflict, have garnered international acclaim. She was named a Build for Peace Fellow in 2017 and 2018, and an Oxford Global Leadership Initiative Fellow in 2016. Quratulain continues to inspire with her unwavering commitment to creating a more just and inclusive world. Let's give a round of applause for Quratulain. Dian Alyan, over here at the end. Dian is the founder and the president of the Give Light Foundation, which embodies resilience and compassion. Born in Indonesia, Dian's life took a transformative turn after the 2004 tsunami. Turning her personal tragedy into a beacon of hope, she established Give Light Foundation to uplift orphans around the world. From its humble beginnings supporting 50 children, Give Light now extends to reach over 1,000 orphans in 11 countries. A former Procter & Gamble executive, Dian's leadership has earned her numerous humanitarian and leadership awards. She has shared her story across global platforms, including prominent universities, Fortune 500 companies, and major publications like Newsweek and Huffington Post. Dian's unwavering dedication to nurturing hundreds of children globally, alongside raising her 2 boys, serves as an inspiration and testament to her boundless love and indomitable spirit. Let's give a round of applause to Dian. And Dr. Geetha Murali is the CEO of Room to Read. She's a visionary leader transforming the landscape of global education with a mission rooted in the belief that world change starts with educated children. Room to Read has reached over 32 million children in 21 countries under her stewardship. Geetha's diverse background spans corporate and nonprofit sectors, including roles at GlaxoSmithKline and Adobe Systems. Her personal history as a daughter fuels her passion for gender equality and literacy. Since beginning Room to Read in 2009, Geetha has driven exceptional growth, extending the organization's impact to 24 countries. Her commitment to measurable and scalable impact has garnered recognition from global leaders, including Michelle Obama and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. She's an inspirational leader that's been featured on outlets like BBC and CNBC, and Geetha champions justice, education, and leadership through steering Room to Read within a future for every child to thrive. Let's give a round of applause to Geetha and all our panelists. So as we just talked about, and as we just heard, it takes a lot of strength and resilience to actually push for something new and different. And you all started something that oftentimes we can consider has not been done before. So my first question to each one of you is, how did you get that strength and courage to do what you're doing today?
Thank you, Mostafa. I think with me, you might call it, some people might call it stupid to not have any fear. I never had a fear of failure. So I have always thought, and it was kind of my dad who passed away many years ago, and he was a very conservative man, but he used to tell me, I was the eldest daughter, that you can do anything. And I literally took it like, okay, I can do anything. So when it came to the military, I was like, why are there no women in the military? Why is that and that? But in 2001, when I got commissioned in the Air Force, the admission of women to the Pakistan Air Force was open. And everybody told me, like, you can't do it, you have never stepped out of your home or whatever. I was like, no, I'm going to do it. And I'm not afraid to fail. I think that fear of failure is something, and it's very huge in women. We are very afraid to fail because we have been culturally told that you have to be careful about things, can't do this. Men I have seen are very brave. They would apply, even if they are qualified for a job of a mechanic, they would apply for a mechanical engineer's job. Even if a woman is qualified to be a mechanical engineer, she would be so afraid to even apply for a mechanic's job. So I think that not having a fear of failure has really helped me. I know I've stepped into very, very bad situations. I have failed a lot. I have embarrassed myself a lot. But it has worked for me up till now. Yeah.
So I think what started me on this path is probably a bit different than what's kept me on it. What started me on this path was a pretty simple realization that with most predictive models out there, I shouldn't be on a stage like this. I shouldn't be in a room like this. I shouldn't be talking to the people I talk to on a regular basis that have the type of influence that they have, largely because my family came from a history of child marriage, and my grandmothers were married at 2 and 14. My mother was pressured to get married at 13 and thankfully resisted, and because of that resistance, I'm here today. Pretty simple, and it's that realization and that recognition, because I was raised knowing that that was the case, that I started on a path wanting to do something more with my life and make it impossible for other young women to have to face those types of choices. What's kept me on the path is being able to work for organizations that do take action. I think it's one thing to have incredible passion, a kind heart, and it's another, and it takes a lot of grit to do something about it. And the organizations I've tended to work for have been implementing organizations that work with communities all over the world, and so you're able to see within a generation incredible change in families. So what happened in my family happens over and over and over again. So I'm able to see that, and that's what keeps me doing what I'm doing.
Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Kya haal hai? Everybody seems sleepy. I am probably the only non-Desi in this room, but I just came back from Pakistan, so I need to kind of show up a little bit about my Urdu, right? My story actually began with a broken heart. I lost my uncle, my cousins, and friends from childhood. And watching my hometown shattered into a million pieces really broke my heart. And many of you in the audience actually have known about Give Light. In fact, many of you support Give Light. Can I just see a raise of hands if you have supported Give Light, you volunteer? See, mashallah, may Allah bless you. So it was driven by devastation and pain. I was a new mother at that time, and watching my son reminds me of 30,000 orphans just in my hometown. So I could go in one scenario where I will be drowning in my sorrow, right? But I turned to Allah and I said, not why me, but what for? And after prolonged self-analysis and prayers, the idea of helping orphans came into existence. And what started as one home, now we have 7 homes that we built from the ground up, including the latest one in Pakistan, in Multan, and everything there is Bahotacha.
It takes a lot of courage in all of your situations to sometimes be the first to do something. So I'd like to start with you. How was it to be the first person to do what you did, being the first person in the Air Force in Pakistan?
So it's a question that I've been asked quite a number of times. And military anywhere, I mean, in United States, anywhere, is a very male-dominated area. It has been very recent that women have joined it. And for me, when I joined the Pakistan Air Force, it was I was very stressed. Military training is extremely difficult. It's not made for men. The first day we went there, they told us you can't wear makeup. I mean, like, what are you even talking about? How can I go and show my face to all these people outside without makeup, being a young girl and all. But that very hard training and all that. But the thing was that it was difficult, but I knew that if it was started as an experiment by the Pakistan's government. So I had a lot of responsibility on my shoulders. And this is what happens to a lot of women who are first in either technology, in either any sector, that we are responsible kind of. And I had to succeed. I mean, there were times, military training is so tough that there were times I really wanted to run away from the academy. The only thing that held me back was, if I leave now, the girls who are looking up to me, the girls who are going to come after me. And now, when I joined, only Pakistan Air Force was taking women. Now Army, Navy, all have women. There are so many women in many roles. So it was very difficult. It was so much so that when we went into that male academy, they asked us not to speak to the male cadets because they have never seen a woman inside. And you're not supposed to speak to them because it might tempt them or something will happen or something, whatever. So, we were not speaking to boys. We were training alongside, and it was very strange for them too, very difficult, very hard routine, not used to it. And when I passed out, when I graduated, I remember I used to wear uniform and I used to walk to my office from my home, and people literally used to stand on the road and look at me as if I was some alien or I was on a show, and they expected me to fail. I did talk about it afterwards. I did face harassment, and I did face a lot of harsh words, but that kind of, thing that I have to do it because I know my sisters, my friends, my future women are looking towards me. So it was very hard, and it's always harder for women whenever they take that first step into any sector. But I think that conviction, that I'm not afraid to fail, that thing of that I have to do it, got me through it. It was difficult. I wouldn't say, and I think all of us women understand this. All of even men who go, I think men also when they are into a new field or something would understand that there is a lot of responsibility on you, and if the future of other people depends on you. And having women in a force like military is a good thing. Even the definition of war is an achievement of political objectives through the military means. That is, if everything else fails. So women bring that a softer thing to it. We are more peace inclined. That's why I talk about conflict prevention, and preventing a conflict is much, much less costly than resolving a conflict. So so that's how I did it.
Thank you for sharing that. And Quratulain just kind of talked about the weight of, that she held. So Geetha, my question to you is the weight with the mission that you're carrying. How have you overcome some of the challenges that you faced, and how do you overcome sometimes what are failures?
I think sometimes when people think about the social sector, there's a number of stereotypes around it, right? Like maybe this is something that you do when you slow down in life, or you're going to do it part-time because you need more flexibility as a woman, or whatever the various stereotypes are. And if anything, I think those that come to the social sector need to be the brightest among us and the ones that are the most skilled and the ones willing to work the hardest, because the challenges are just that important and just that influential for the future of our world. So when I think about the challenges that Room to Read faces, we're taking on the inadequacy of many education systems around the world. So we could look at that and we could say, oh, the problem's too big. We don't want to tackle it. But instead, we're building an organization that could rival any multinational. It's right now a $70 million organization, but has huge leverage working with governments and the private sector all over the world. You have talent that's coming from some of the best universities, but also individuals who spent their entire careers and lives working for their communities and helping to ensure that the children in their communities get the skills they need to build their communities further for the future. And what has made Room to Read successful has been the ability to build those partnerships across the public and private sector, the ability to mobilize folks from very many different backgrounds, and no matter what your political affiliation or what country you were born in or what community you were born to, we can all agree that children should know how to read. We can all agree that girls should be equipped enough to continue through school. These are fundamental truths. And if as a community, a global community, we can agree on those sorts of things, then we can bring people together. And I truly believe that children, when equipped with the appropriate skills, are going to make the best decisions for themselves, their families, and communities, because they're coming from a place of knowledge and information, and ideally compassion, because through reading, you are learning about other parts of the world, you are seeing yourself on the page, you are looking through windows into other worlds, and from that comes the empathy you need to do something bigger than yourself. So.
Thank you for sharing that. And Geetha, you talked about kind of like the challenges of inadequacies around the world. So my question for you, Dian, is you started very personal with a problem or a challenge within, where you came from. What made you decide to expand globally?
I know that poverty is not an isolated problem. If you look at the world, everywhere right now, if you can run the list, right? From Burma to China, Iraq, Afghanistan, Gaza, we know. So I think because it was also driven by my background in Procter & Gamble, I see the world as one place. I don't so much feel like I'm an Indonesian, therefore let's just focus on one country. And I'm inspired by our Prophet, Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, who was sent as a mercy to mankind. So I don't really want to isolate my work into one specific geography. I don't know if that's answered the question.
That's great. Quratulain, my question for you is, you talked about your start kind of in the Air Force and what they told you what to do. Now, as somebody who's gone through it, how would you do it differently to create bigger impact for other people like you?
I think I was talking with a colleague before this that when I was growing up, or maybe joining Pakistan's Air Force or the civil services, or creating a non-profit, I did not have a woman mentor growing up. I had no story to learn from. I had very supportive men in my life. My father was very supportive and all. I joined an organization that was all men, and they were trying to, train me like a man. But now we have so many women. I would suggest that if I was to go back, I would probably take a few women mentors with me, because they would understand and place them in that frame of time to do things. So I think because women's experiences are very important to different narratives, be it public sector or non-profit. So I would just touch, if you have some time, I would just touch back to, taking this narrative from Air Force to to the non-profit that I started, Women for Peace Tech. It did not come about because I was trying to make a non-profit who was dealing with women participating in technology for peace things. No. I was trying to work in a public sector organization that was dealing with water conflicts, and we were trying to find a solution to the water conflicts. And one of the solutions that came about was that women came to me because I was a woman. They were easier. It was easier for them to come to me and tell me that, we are the ones who are affected by the conflict. We go and fetch the water. When somebody stops water to our land, we are the ones who are going to suffer. Our children are going to suffer, and we want a solution to it. And we are going to offer that solution. They did not even ask me that. They said, okay, what we'll do, we'll open our house, get that jirga, that's a committee or anything, get the people, the parties to the conflict, to our house, make them sit, and we'll make them promise that this conflict is going to resolve, and we are going to hold our husbands, brothers, and sons to these promises. These women who were not educated, who were not, these women of the world, were able to do that. And it was not something I was aiming at. So they we had these agreements in these women's houses. They were shared water resources, and it was such a successful project that it was replicated along. It started in one city, it's called Chakwal of Punjab, and it was replicated along at least 15 cities. And it was not something that I was thinking that was there, but it happened because they probably saw there was a woman in some position, and women were comfortable talking to them and probably, conveying. So we need, I think, more of women mentors. I would change that if I can go back in time, and I would want, I think there was a Nike ad or something that's, or maybe that says that, I don't want to be the first woman. I want to be one of many. So that is something our aim should be.
And this question's for the panel. How have your different initiatives grown with the introduction of intersectionality of the issues that you're addressing? Whether that be intersectionally for different minority religions, underrepresented groups, education levels, how has that impacted your organization, and how do you address it?
I can speak on behalf of Room to Read. We work on two major issues. We work on literacy for primary school children and life skills for adolescents, just knowing that those are sort of the gatekeeper skills to be able to acquire any other skills in your education. So from an intersectionality perspective, gender plays quite a critical role in the content that we use with younger children. And I'll give you an example. We're one of the largest book publishers in the world in languages that are not profitable to publish in. And so we know that children will learn how to read more effectively if they learn in their mother tongue first. So just as an example, these are some of the children's books from Pakistan. We end up using the stories we tell to help introduce children to stereotypes differently, right? So as an example, we have a children's book called Rescue the Princess, where a young girl goes and sits in a tree, and she wants the little boy to come and save her. And so she's sitting up there waiting, and the little boy is pretending to be a knight, and he's ready to climb up the tree. But every time he's about to climb up the tree, something happens. One time, a little snake shows up, and he gets scared, so she has to crawl down the tree, kill the snake, then climb back up the tree and wait for him again. And so then he's ready again to go and save her, but then he gets scared of heights. So then she has to come down the tree and get a ladder and put the ladder so he can climb up and save her. So it's a very, smart but fun book, but introduces this idea of independence somewhat differently, sort of turning stereotypes on their head. So there's ways at very young ages to help children see the world differently, because we know from research, young girls right around their young teens start limiting themselves. Before that, they tend to be a lot more willing to take a risk and willing to think that they can accomplish anything. But something happens in those teenage years where they begin limiting themselves based on the environment around them and what they're learning and socialized around. Similarly, take something like education and conflict. We do a lot of work in conflict and post-conflict regions. And there was a children's book title we did recently called the plane that brings love. And in Arabic, the words for war and love are differentiated by a single letter. So the young boy in the story says he hates war and wants to get rid of the R sound so that the plane starts dropping hearts, for the children. So we try to use the context that the children have and that they need to be able to develop literacy skills, but introduce them to perhaps a different vision of the world.
That's a beautiful story, and I think, for the record, for those who know Arabic, it's harb and hub, right? And this question was for the panel, but if we were to kind of go deeper into your response, have you encountered resistance from authoritative figures in the different regions of the world of the transformation that you're trying to make, and how do you navigate that as a nonprofit organization?
So Room to Read works almost primarily in public school systems around the world. So we do need to work with governments very closely to have access, and we're working for a large number of schools at the same time. At times, we also are working in non-formal settings, like in Lebanon, we work in the Bekaa Valley, for example, with a number of non-formal sites. And in all these cases, we need government support and access. And so the way we've gone about doing that is building a very local organization. So anywhere Room to Read is in the world, the leadership through to the community teams are local nationals, and that's a non-negotiable. We have 1,600 staff, 90% are local nationals. And as a result of that, there is a true understanding of the needs. The community is a part of the solution. So we talk of first in the family to get educated. We have the first fathers in their families supporting their girls for the first time, right? So all of these things it's not just about the one child and saying you're empowered somehow, go save the world, but it's about taking stakeholders that are influenced and impacted by the changes being made and understanding how they can be a part of that solution. And I think that's what's made the model so successful and allowed us to benefit 40 million children at this point around the world.
And Dian, what about for you the role of intersectionality and potentially kind of the deeper level of the question, working with those authoritative figures and negotiating? How is that balance? How are you able to strike that balance?
Yeah, I think to answer that question, I can share 2 examples. When we were trying to expand to Bangladesh, it was very difficult because a lot of corruption, and people wanted to bribe, So I don't know if you experience that in Room to Read, so you have to kind of stay on your principle, right? As far as gender equity, for example, we try to help both gender, but we go to the donor of the land because our core model is the land has always been donated. So we ask the donor, what would you prefer for that context, right? So for example, in Pakistan, the family who donated the land, who later became my Baba, he wants me to call him Baba, isn't that sweet, mashallah. He said, I cannot choose because you look at the boys, they're also as needy, and the girls. So we finally, after going back and forth, we finally choose both. So now we have both genders in the home. But we never sort of highlight that as even an issue, right? And again, I always go back to our Dean, like, God doesn't see us as different based on gender. It's a human construct. Is that correct? Right, so I think that's one example. But in terms of working with the government, I think the best example has been with Morocco. The King of Morocco actually sent his army for the opening of our home in Morocco because they're really impressed with the quality of the home. They sponsored our grand opening, and even later on, we needed a bus for the transportation of our children, and the government, the kingdom, also donated a bus. So I think it depends country by country. Some are really corrupt, and you would argue also in some country, I'm not going to mention which one, including Indonesia, right? But I believe that in any country in the world, there is at least one honest people, right? So your job is to find that honest family, and then from there it expands. And so for me, I guess to answer other question earlier, in terms of challenge for us, the biggest thing is to find honest people in the ground. And since I have a lot of Pakistani in the audience here, I want to reach 1,000 orphans in Pakistan. I cannot do it alone, so please, if you're interested in helping, find me on LinkedIn, text me, and I'll make you work, inshallah.
So this is a question for the panel, like what kind of factors come into place to keep your organization sustainable as a nonprofit? And what are the difficulties that you face with regard to sustainability?
I think, but just before that, I just wanted to make a point regarding your last question, because I work for the government and I have worked for IGO and I've worked for a nonprofit. So I think one of the things to work with government, especially in Pakistan or anywhere, you have to probably sell the idea as something profitable to them as well. Profitable in the meaning of that, it is something they would want to do it. It is something that might make them look better in the eyes of public, because that is what government is vying to do. So sometimes there are very amazing ideas, but if you're not being able to convince the government, they would not work with you. So the initiatives that Geetha and Dian have talked about, it is something they are working because the government has a stake with that. So you have to make government a stakeholder in your idea as well. So then coming back to sustainability, for me, when we started Women for Peace Stack, we were able to, I think the first issue is funding. Funding is a very big issue that a lot of nonprofits face. And there is a lot of talk, and I did experience that as well, that, sometimes there are certain, when you're looking for funding, sometimes because you are a small organization, you might not be able to access certain funding because it has already been taken by a big organization or somebody who is known to the funders or who have more clout or more accessibility. So I would suggest for funding, what we did, we started to look for non-conventional sources, maybe small funders, maybe look at something that might be working just on, for me, it was water and peace. So I was able to find a fellowship that was willing to actually fund as part of the fellowship for my organization. So we started from there. And I think funding is because you need money to run these projects. They are non-profit, but they require money, they require support, and you have to work on it on a sustainable basis. I have seen a lot of, as a government official as well as somebody who has I've seen a lot of initiatives fail because once the initial source of funding has dried up, they're not sustainable. They haven't really found something in the local ecosystem what is going to sustain them. So that is something, maybe finding some local support is very important for any nonprofit to work in any country. That's what I think.
Yeah, I think that's financial sustainability is one really big part of how you build your nonprofit. Some organizations are able to diversify their funding. I think for our sector, leverage is really important too. It's not just a one-to-one. It's, how can you utilize what's already happening in the system? Let's say it's a government system that you're working with. I'll give you the example of Vietnam for us, where we established school libraries. We were doing so for over a decade. And the government, because of the structure of their staff, always had observers for what we were doing. And as a result of that, they were training up during that decade on how to establish school libraries. And so when we wanted to go nationwide and the government adopted our model for national scale, it was very fast. Within a few years, there was a commitment to all schools in Vietnam having school libraries, and we could be a technical assistance partner without doing it ourselves. So we got quite a lot of leverage out of that, and more children benefit more quickly. So I think leverage is a really big piece of it. The other piece is, I think, program sustainability. You're always thinking about how you're rolling out a program so that it's able to continue beyond your implementation. And for us, a lot of that is because we're using public school systems and educators from the public school system. Once we train, and we train several point people, the school is able to take that forward. Or if we're establishing a library or publishing books, then we train local publishers to be able to publish books that they can then sell to the government, and then work with the government to have guidelines on what kinds of books to buy, so then we're creating a profitable ecosystem. So I think program sustainability is important as well. The other I would say is talent, which a lot of times nonprofits aren't thinking about as much, and that is how do you upskill your own staff over time, so that as you're developing as an organization, that you're bringing in young people, let's say who are early in their careers, that you're helping them build the skills they need to be able to do more, because these are people who are very passionate about the mission and they want to be able to do more, but they may not have the same types of professional development opportunities that a for-profit entity might be able to give them. So how can you get creative through your networks, your donor base, your board, to give them access to upskilling opportunities? Because I think that's another piece of building a sustainable organization.
I think for me, it's about delivering results and impact. When people see that you deliver what you promise, then it builds credibility, and they want to give over time. And as far as your strategy, we've also been working with corporate. So there are, the first corporation we worked with was Cisco Foundation, and it took a long time to establish. But once you have that, then it grows, right? So from one corporation, now we are matched by about 100 major corporations in the Bay Area, including Google, Apple, Cisco, American Express, and so forth. So that's one way to sustain your revenue, because every donation is matched 100%. And I see smiling faces in the audience, because I think some of my friends does that all the time. And we also recently launched a program with our children who are going to college. We used to give them as a charity. You can go to college, it's a charity, right? But we switched that model to turn it into a loan that is interest-free. So once you graduate from college, you are required to give back to Give Light, so that we can support the next group of children to go to college. So you actually save multi-generations as far as sustainability. Thank you.
Thank you. I think one of the most difficult things when you start something new, or when you take a position of power, is the obstacles that you face are perhaps not what people expect to be obstacles. So what is the biggest obstacle that either you have overcome or are overcoming? And this is an open-ended question. It could be a mental hurdle, or an actual operational hurdle.
I think for me, when I go back to that water conflict project, when we started it, the biggest obstacle were the people who we were trying to help. So this is something very interesting. Sometimes organizations, public sector, non-profit go into a field and try to resolve a problem that they think is important with the solution that they think is appropriate, and that offends the local population. They say, like, how we have not been consulted sometimes, why do you think that you go? And secondly, when you're coming from a public sector organization or a new organization into very conservative areas, or in areas they're not very welcoming to strangers, they would be very suspicious of you. So when we started that project, so the local people were not willing to trust. They were not willing to cooperate. They were like, no, this is something that, not. So it took us a very long time to gain that trust. And that's where, again, coming back to the women were very helpful, because they saw it and they said, if men are going to be stubborn, we are still going to be, without water, we are still going to suffer. Our children will not have food and all that. So sometimes, for me, it was very eye-opening. And from that experience, I learned that whenever we are going with an agenda, that is the problem with a lot of very big organizations. When you go with this aim to resolve a problem, first you have to go to the people who have that problem and rightly try to identify the problem. It is the problem. How is this problem supposed to be addressed? So that is something that was very strange for me. Like, that was not something else. That was just the people who had the problem. who were very offended by the way we were trying to address it.
So I'll maybe come at this from two different angles. One is the challenges for the larger organization that I think are overwhelming, and that is the same challenges that face education more broadly for the world, right? Which is that there's not enough educators, and there's not a large number of skilled people looking to become educators. So for lack of that, and all the, the big UN organizations have talked about teacher shortages being one of the biggest limiting factors for us to be able to teach children to read young. One of the things we've done to overcome it is to broaden the definition of what an educator is, and again, create as much leverage as possible. So for example, for displaced populations, a lot of times the adults that are present are actually educated, but they just don't have the support they need to be able to continue children's educations in post-conflict situations. So how are we able to support them to be able to educate children through the use of devices or content availability or training, so that they can make sure that the children who they support are continuing their education. So I think that's an example, but these are some of the big systemic issues we're fighting. I think as a leader, the bigger challenge is sort of the stereotypes around what leadership is when you get to positions of power. And so I think, a lot of women who are in positions of power can tell you they were the first in the room, that was a room full of men. And it was the first time they were leading their organization. Like for me, I was the first non-founder CEO of my organization, first woman of color leading the organization. We were funded very heavily from bankers and Wall Street. So that was a shift, right, for the organization to be able to be led by someone who looked different. I was younger than the previous CEOs. And anecdotally, if I would go to an interview, for example, and this happened once, a pretty reputable journalist had me on a Zoom call, couldn't hear the audio, assumed I was the press contact and not the CEO. So having 4 degrees, from reputable universities and being able to make really critical decisions better than your male counterparts isn't enough when all they care about is your smile. Right, so you're trying to overcome a lot of different stereotypes of what a leader looks like. I think the good news, as what you're saying, is there are a lot more role models for girls and boys, because one thing I always tell people is gender equality is not taking from the men and giving to the women, right? Gender equality is really about ensuring that there's not limitations on either gender as a result of their gender. And we know that more gender equal societies are generally happier societies, and we know limitations on men to curtail their emotions or not, to not be able to let out their anger in healthy ways. Those are things that hurt men as well. So how do we think about gender equality from the perspective of supporting entire communities and making everyone prosper together? So that's something that we're always trying to overcome, not just for our programs, for our leadership as well.
I think for me, it's to stay focused on your mission. It's very tempted to go and fix other problems because there's so many problems in the world. I remember one time a donor came to me and said, I want to give a big donation to Give Light, close to $200,000, but I want you to build a school. So we're not about building school, and unfortunately I would have to stay focused and say I can't take that donation, right? Because even if it's just focusing on orphans, there are 153 million orphans in the world. How many lifetimes do I need to fix that problem? And I get emotional because of what's happening in Gaza, yes? 30,000 orphans, maybe 40,000. So even if I dedicate the rest of my life, that problem will not be fixed. But this is my covenant with God that I want to be used to help children. So to stay focused on your mission, I think is one of the key challenges. And the second is to find honest people who will take care of the children. I have been in a situation where I saw a staff, this was in Cambodia, an English teacher, very distant from the children, never hug the children, never interact with the children. And that is a red flag for me. I mean, when you work with the children, the first thing you need is to be compassionate, to show love and care. And these children call me Ummi, so I'm their mother, right? They don't care I'm a CEO or they don't know any of that. To them, I am their mother. So when I saw this, I started to dig, why is there no interaction? And no smile. So the other thing I said now, to be a mother in Give Light Home, you have to smile a lot. And amazingly, the mothers in Pakistan, the first time I had a Zoom call, big smile. And when I went there, 24/7 smile. I said, you're staying, mashallah, right? So I had to let go of this girl because she worked there because she's poor and she needs the money, but the heart is not there. So for me, I hire character because you can train skills. Thank you.
Wow, thank you so much. We're practically at time, so I'll just ask one closing question to be answered in 2 sentences, hopefully, if it's possible. What is one piece of advice as women of color that you could give to our audience in terms of changing and breaking barriers?
Can I start?
Sure.
Okay. I think you need to not worry about the world. Ask yourself, what is it that you really, really want to achieve in your lifetime? Okay? It's not a lack of time. It's not a lack of resources. It's maybe a lack of motivation and a lack of clarity. Because once you define that, the world will come together and help you achieve it. Thank you.
I say something very similar to my staff when we get overwhelmed, that you may not be able to change the whole world, but you can definitely change your world. And it's very similar to what you were describing. I think the other thing that I would emphasize is that a lot of times people come to this work with heart. And I think it's incredibly important to have that commitment to the work and to feel it deeply, right? Because that's what's going to drive you to keep doing the work. But just as important are the skills that you need to run organizations like ours. You need the grit, you need the resilience, but you also need functional skill sets. And I think sometimes people just think about the social sector, and I'll keep coming back to this, as like a gooey, mushy place. And sometimes we're running really big organizations and we're negotiating with really powerful people, and you do need the skills to show up in that room and kick some butt.
I'll just say that, we have been listening to a lie all our life, that there is a box and we have to think outside the box. There is no box. Just think whatever you want, just do whatever you want to do, and just go and just kick ass. That's it.
And another round of applause to our panel. Thank you all very much.